Over the past few years, I've seen a rising boom in solo game devs, that being people who are making games literally by themselves, usually self-funded or as hobbyist developers. And I've been a part of that group for over 10 years now. During the boom of Unity back in the early 2010s, it was the only software at the time really designed for making 3D games that didn't have an upfront cost. But as games become more accessible for people to make by themselves, the questions begin to rise, and we've actually seen more and more, I believe, failed games, and that's because the tools now are so widely accessible, and basically anyone with a computer and internet connection can make a video game, whether it is 2D, 3D, on Steam, on mobile. Even so many of the console platforms now just allow you to publish on their storefronts. And as someone who has been making games kind of since the beginning of this time period where creators have been able to make things themselves independently from publishers and bigger companies, I feel like there's so much I wish I knew when I was first starting out. And because there is so much advice on YouTube now about how to get started making games, and a lot of it now focused around the money of making games, that's not a bad thing. However, I think that's a false promise to you. I can't promise you how much money you make, but I can promise advice and wisdom from someone who's been making games for over 10 years by themselves. And as someone who's had to learn a lot of things through basic trial and error and who has seen trends come and go, I want to share the 4 things I think every solo developer should focus on and be made aware of when making games alone. Now, this can also relate to people who are making games in a small team, but this video is primarily focused to people who have not worked in the industry, who are basically starting out or been making games for a while and feel like they're getting stuck on things. I personally have been stuck on a lot of projects, and I'm hoping with the information here that's out in this video and me working on that consistently, I can soon have a more impressive portfolio of things to show you and also prove to you that making games by yourself is possible. There's just a few important elements to it. Now, the first one is the most practical, and that is the pipeline. Pipeline is the first thing you should really do as a solo dev to really understand each step of your process and how you're going to create assets and put them into your game. You're going to find a lot of roadblocks and things you can actually clean up and automate. So some examples of these things I'm talking about are things like Blender quick actions and presets that make exporting things to Unreal a lot easier and quicker for me. I also set up a base project in Unreal that removes majority of the bloat from the engine. So each time I'm opening the project, I'm not waiting compile times for things like water assets that I don't even have water in my game, so why is that asset there? This is also the best time to start working on tools for your game, and you want to automate things faster, whether it's importing things into the game project or whether you're building a game from scratch, figuring out ways that you can more seamlessly switch between different applications as you work. Like for me, I'm building an application that actually automates building a project in Unreal, pushing those changes to a Git, and then uploading them to Steamworks for then doing private playtesting through Steam. And that's something that I wish I'd actually done in pre-production and figured out how to do, because I've already been building projects and pushing them to Git and pushing those builds to Steam manually for several months. And I've actually technically wasted a lot of time that I could have just spent building this other tool that automates things. Now, not every pipeline is perfect, and maybe there's certain things that you need with the tools that you have, but definitely the first thing is understand your pipeline and trying to optimize it. Pipeline, definitely can be quite confusing and overwhelming, unlike Brilliant, who is sponsoring this solo dev's video. How cool is that? So Brilliant is where you learn by doing. They've got lessons that are interactive, which actually makes things like learning math and data analysis and programming actually engaging and fun. Brilliant helps me create positive habits, instead of doom scrolling, making me stressed and anxious at the state of the world. I complete modules and tests that make me feel better about myself, rather than curling up into a ball and wondering why the axolotl is by the pink stairs. I don't understand Gen Z brain rot. Brilliant makes that all better. It's really great for those who may be continuing or starting out in data analysis, with a full suite of new content covering data visualizations, so all those fancy graphs and pie charts, and learning how to parse and visualize massive data sets, making them easier to interpret. They even get you to gain insights by working with real data sets from sources like Airbnb, Spotify, Starbucks, and more. you can try everything Brilliant has to offer for 30 days for free. Visit brilliant.org/Nathan Rona or scan the QR code on screen or click the link in the description. Either way, you'll be getting 20% off an annual premium membership. Genuinely, thank you, Brilliant, for sponsoring this video and supporting independent creators and solo game developers like myself. Next is a really important one that's very difficult to actually teach and give you proper advice within a video. It's something that's definitely more of a one-on-one, but that is discipline. First of all, to be disciplined, I believe you need to be consistent. So being consistent in its first definition, which is what I'm talking about here, is acting or done in the same way over time, especially as to be fair or accurate. Now, when I talk about consistency, I'm not saying so much as you are always doing the same equal amount of work through development. I understand that when you make games, things ebb and flow. It's the same thing in all of business. We have weekdays, weekends. The work that you do on a Monday is going to be very different from what you do on a Friday. It's more looking at how you think you're working objectively. Do you get distracted when your friends ask you to hop online and play games with them? Are there other distractions, whether it's doom scrolling, watching YouTube videos? Hold yourself accountable for actions like that you take. Giving yourself a short-term goal and then working towards that is going to help you so much in staying disciplined. What I do is I have a big Trello board of my monthly things I kind of want vaguely in terms of things being done, but then I'll break that down to week by week tasks that I want accomplished. And by working on those smaller micro goals, hopefully I'll be able to accomplish those larger, bigger goals. But I'll make sure I'm never doing more than 2 things at a time. And that's usually an artistic thing as well as a technical thing, usually programming or some sort of engine related tool that I'm trying to set up. But whenever I feel like my progress is slowing down or I'm getting caught in the weeds, I'm hyper fixating on something that I want to get working that just isn't working, and putting more time and energy into it just isn't cutting it, that is when I'll pull back and take breaks. And that is when, at least for me, helps me remain consistent, because then when I go back and revisit those things, I know that I only work on this when I am productive. Again, this information can seem kind of counterintuitive in saying that you should always work even when you don't want to, as well as don't work when you don't feel like you're being productive. And this is something as a solo game dev that you will actually have to learn to and adapt. If you have a good work ethic and you have goals and deadlines, whether it's going to certain game events or especially when you get playtest feedback and you want to implement the feedback and changes, that'll help you a lot. And you'll kind of know within a month-by-month basis whether or not you're making good progress. If you feel like you're stalling or that things are taking too long, that's when you need to revisit your discipline and figure out whether or not it's a you issue or a project issue and kind of adapt it from there. Now, the next important thing when making games alone is your community. And this could mean many different things, from starting a Discord to posting on Reddit, TikTok, starting a YouTube channel. Just find a place to grow your fan base and make posts of whatever you're putting on the internet at least once a week. Things like creating mini series of stuff, whether it's mini tutorials on how you do certain things, mini devlogs of what you've been working on, or even showcasing older work of different projects and how things have changed over time. Heck, even just posting your opinion on industry news cycle stuff and just trying to stay relevant and consistent in the community and the target audience you're trying to grow. This will also give you a really good understanding on how your game and as well as your personality conveys online to a broader community. If you're finding your game gets 0 interactions that no one cares about, then you can kind of suspect how things are going to go on launch of your game. This, I think, is actually a great smaller testing ground. It means you can prototype and make things more quickly, because making this game is going to take you at least a few months, if not definitely a lot longer, depending on, the timeline that you're making here. And when you're posting things to your community, you get quicker feedback and you begin to understand more of what they want and the type of content and things that they're looking for. This will help you in the future, especially if you're pitching to things like grant funding or publishers. You can actually show them the data of like, hey, this is what people find engaging with me as a person or in the project that I'm working on. And it will also give you a lot more reassurance with how your game is going to go at release. Knowing that you have a supportive community will help you with many things, it being feedback, initial sales, and even when you want to do things like merch or anything else that you want to make, sequels, prequels, animated shows, podcasts, or whatever else that branches off from what you do as a solo game dev. Having that community is actually a really strong backing, because as a solo game developer, you are quite alone. And so having people that you can actually talk to about the thing that you're working on is something that so many solo developers are actually missing out on. Because in its definition, solo game dev is an isolated experience. And if you're making games for other people, then being isolated is going to be a really big detriment to you. It kind of goes back to the whole pipeline optimization thing. Keep what works, get rid of what doesn't. That's all you need to do. And then just work on flourishing that community and growing that. And from there, I hope only more success and good fortune to you. And now the final and most important thing, I think, once you've got these other things set up and they're working well for you, getting feedback from your game. As soon as it is playable, get friends, get family just to try it out and give their opinions on it. Use the community that you're growing. Get playtests and try to really get people to share their feelings and thoughts on your game. Maybe there's certain things you're trying to invoke or convey in your game that just isn't working. Now, it's also important to know that if grandma plays your video game and she's never played a game in her life, her feedback's going to be very different from your friends on Discord. So the other important part of that feedback is being able to separate bits of information from the useful to the unuseful. Going to game dev networking events and getting an actual game developer's opinion on your game versus going to school or social gathering places to get people's feedback, you're going to get different things. But the biggest thing, I think, is trying to get a decent chunk of people to play your game with each new update and change. So whether it is just having a group of friends that you send builds to and they give their feedback on, but I'd love to see more developers doing things like going to the local library and doing like a playtest session to the public, or leasing out a spot in a shopping center mall. That's something I've always wanted to do, and you will of course run into things like bugs and glitches, but the most important things in your game is your design and your feel. If people are not understanding how to play your game, that's probably a design issue. And if you're finding people getting frustrated with your chill game or finding your really intense, stressful game too easy, then that's also probably a design issue as well. But it kind of all stems back to design, was what I'm trying to say. But design will help you so much in understanding the priority you need for what you're working on in your game. It'll also help you understand whether or not you're invoking the correct feelings. Because I'll give you a fun bit of advice, especially for those who are starting off in their game dev journey. A lot of people try to make games that they either want to play or make, or games that they've played in the past and they want more of. Especially when it comes to AAA games that you may have loved previously, I would suggest not actually trying to make that 1-for-1 ratio, but rather try to figure out the thoughts and feelings you had when playing that game. Did it make you feel powerful? Did it make you feel sad or happy? Was there a mix of emotions you had when you're playing that game that you thought, man, this is the experience? Look at how people respond to certain things when they're playing your game. Do they get excited when they unlock something or when they achieve a difficult task? That is what you want to focus more on as a solo developer, is the thoughts and feelings of players when they experience your game. That is what you want to iterate on. Now, I hope this video has been helpful to you and you've learned something. If you've enjoyed, then please do hit subscribe, because I've got a new video coming out soon about my experience doing a Steam playtest and how it did not go as planned. And as well, if you want to watch more videos, I've got some here on different topics, still related to game dev, of course. But watching them and doing a binge really helps me out as well. Thank you again to Valiant for sponsoring this video, and thanks to you for supporting another solo dev. Good luck, have fun, and I hope you make something awesome.